The federal death penalty in the United States is one of the most severe forms of justice, but it is also one of the most controversial. Although it is applied in all 50 states and territories, its use is exceptional. In fact, President Biden commuted the federal death sentences of 37 men on December 23, 2024, leaving only 3 prisoners on federal death row. However, this was not always the norm. During the Trump administration, federal capital punishment was revived after a nearly 2-decade hiatus. In his first term, Trump oversaw the execution of 13 convicts, becoming the president with the most executions in over a century. Now, in his new term, history may repeat itself. Will we witness new executions under his administration? In this video, we explore the crimes committed by these convicts, the last meal they requested, their final words, and how they were executed. Welcome. Daniel at 8:07 a.m. Wesley Ira Perkey. State, Indiana. On January 26, 1998, in Kansas City, Missouri, Wesley Ira Perkey abducted 16-year-old Jennifer Long. After ending her life, he dismembered her body and disposed of it in a septic pond in Kansas. He was also convicted of ending the life of an 80-year-old woman with a hammer. Perkey was arrested and found guilty in federal court in 2003. He was sentenced to death and spent 17 years on death row at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. During his time in prison, his lawyers argued that he suffered from schizophrenia and Alzheimer's, attempting to halt his execution without success. The day before his execution, he was offered a last meal. Perkey requested a nut cake. On July 16, 2020, Wesley Ira Perkey was executed by lethal injection at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. The execution was carried out after a long legal battle over his mental state. When asked for his last words, Perkey said, "I deeply regret the pain I caused to Jennifer Long's family. I am so sorry." He then closed his eyes and remained silent until he was declared dead at 8:19 a.m. Lewis Lee, State, Indiana. On January 11, 1996, Daniel Lewis Lee, along with his accomplice Chevy Kehoe, broke into the home of William Frederick Muller, a firearms dealer in Arkansas. Their intention was to steal firearms and cash. Inside the house were Muller, his wife Nancy, and their 8-year-old daughter Sarah. Lee and Kehoe subdued the family, took them to the basement, placed plastic bags over their heads, and bound them with duct tape. They then threw their bodies into a swamp in northeastern Arkansas, where they were found months later. Lee was arrested in June 1997 and, after a trial in 1999, was sentenced to death in federal court on multiple charges, including murder during a robbery and conspiracy. Despite his defense's attempts to reduce his sentence by arguing that Kehoe, the alleged leader of the crime, received a life sentence, the court upheld the death penalty. He spent over 20 years on death row while various legal battles over his execution were fought. The day before his execution, he was offered a last meal. However, Lee rejected the special meal and chose to have the standard prison menu. On July 14, 2020, Daniel Lewis Lee was executed by lethal injection at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. The execution had been scheduled for the previous day but was delayed by last-minute appeals. Finally, after the Supreme Court lifted the stay, the procedure was carried out in the early hours. When asked for his last words, Lee said, "I didn't do it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I'm not a killer. You're killing an innocent man." He then closed his eyes and remained silent while the lethal injection was administered. He was declared dead. Dustin Honkin. State, Indiana. On July 25, 1993, Dustin Honkin, a methamphetamine dealer, along with his girlfriend Angela Johnson, kidnapped and ended the lives of 5 people in Mason City, Iowa. Among the victims were Greg Nicholson, a former associate who had become a police informant, Lori Duncan, Nicholson's girlfriend who had no ties to drug trafficking, and Lori's two daughters, Candy and Amber, aged 10 and 6 respectively. Additionally, Honken also ended the life of Terry DeGius, another drug dealer, by beating him with a bat and shooting him. The murders occurred while Honken was out on bail for a drug case. Nicholson and Lori Duncan were tied up, gagged, and shot multiple times, while Candy and Amber, dressed in swimsuits on a hot summer day, were executed with gunshots to the head. Their bodies were not found until 7 years later. In 2005, Honken was found guilty and sentenced to death on 5 counts of murder. He then spent time on death row at the United States Penitentiary Terre Haute Federal Prison in Indiana. The day before his execution, he was offered a last meal, but there are no official records of what Honken requested. On July 17, 2020, Honken was executed by lethal injection at USP Terre Haute. His execution marked the resumption of the federal death penalty after 17 years of inactivity. When asked for his last words, Honken responded, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for me. Lesmond Charles Mitchell. State, Arizona." On October 28, 2001, Lesmond Charles Mitchell and Johnny Theodore Orsinger were hitchhiking when they were picked up by 63-year-old Alice Slim and her 9-year-old granddaughter Tiffany Lee. Slim and Lee were returning home after visiting friends in Gallup, New Mexico. During the trip, Mitchell and Orsinger attacked the victims. Mitchell slit the young girl's throat, while Orsinger struck Slim with rocks and stabbed her to death. They then dragged the bodies to a nearby forest, decapitated them, set them on fire, and buried them in a shallow grave. Afterwards, they used Slim's vehicle to commit an armed robbery at a post office. Authorities conducted an extensive investigation, leading to the arrest of Mitchell and several of his accomplices on November 4th and 5th, 2001. A federal grand jury indicted Mitchell on 11 charges, including kidnapping, vehicle theft, and murder. Since the crimes occurred during a carjacking, the case was handled at the federal level. During his trial in April 2003, Mitchell's defense argued that while he was present, he was not the primary perpetrator of the murders. However, on May 8th, he was found guilty and sentenced to death on September 15th of the same year. On August 26th,